In this video, I'm going to show you how you can make tallow from beef fat suet, and that it is really simple. You don't even need any special equipment. If you have a stove and a pot, you're good to go. If you're new here on my channel, my name is Anya and I love sharing heritage homemaking made simple. And this is really one of the most essential fats that we can have in any homemaking and homesteading kitchen, and that is tallow. It has so many uses in obviously cooking because it's really healthy, in soap making, in candle making, in skincare, and there's so many different uses for tallow that I want to show you how to make it. Here I have my beef tallow that I had previously frozen and then defrosted, so I wanted a little bit on the firmer side, and the first thing I need to do is chop it up very finely. You can do this in a food processor, however I find that somewhat messy, so I'm actually okay doing it by hand with a really good sharp knife. Chop away here, first in slices, and then you can make little cubes. And as you can see, this is not difficult at all. So now that I have chopped it up, we will put it in a pot over the stove, and we'll add all of the chopped up beef fat in there. Now I'm going to add a lot of good filtered water. And some salt, because the salt will help draw out the impurities and the meat bits that are still in there. I'm gonna stand right here and watch it. So I want this to not come to a full boil, but I turned up the heat pretty high for now. However, you do not want to have this vigorously boiling over a big high heat, because that will brown it, and then your tallow is going to be good, but it's going to look really brown, and it's so much nicer when it's white or just like an off-white. We are about halfway through here about our tallow rendering process, and I have a bit of a simmer going here. I've been staying close by, I mean not like right here the whole time, but close by. I walked off and came right back to make sure that this is not going to get too hot, because obviously you want this on the lowest heat that you can create a little simmer. And I do have a simmer plate underneath it. If you're, especially if you have a gas burner, if your output is too high, then you can always use, and I highly recommend that, a cast iron simmer plate that you can place underneath to soften up the output. I want to also talk about the quality of beef fat that you want to use for this, and I always recommend that you use the highest quality ingredients that you can afford. And obviously the gold standard here is grass-fed and grass-finished. There's difference here. Beef, because that is the healthiest and the animals are the healthiest. So that's obviously the gold standard, but you know, whatever you can afford. And the whole process really is because, as you can see here, let me pull this out. We have these bits and pieces in here. I could tell when I was cutting it up that there was even a little bit of meat in there, and you have connective tissue. It's sort of coming apart right now. So you can see here that there are some darker bits and pieces. So we want to render all of that out to get our tallow as light in color as possible and free from any impurities. So we'll continue rendering this. Obviously you can tell that the pieces have become already a lot smaller, but there's still some bigger pieces in here that I really want most of all dissolved. So the fat pieces dissolved, but the impurities are just always going to be there. So I'll show you what that looks like in a moment when we come back. This process really can't be rushed, so this is a few hours later. This might, depending on how much tallow you're rendering and how finely you had chopped it, this might take 5 or 6 hours. So you'd rather want to go slow and not boil it too high than scorching it and getting it all brown. Now over here I have prepared a big bowl, and I have a sieve, and I have some, actually these are paint strainers, and then I have a ladle. So we will strain out all these little bits and pieces and impurities of the rendered tallow. You want to be really careful because it's a very hot. Hot grease is always hotter than just hot water. You can ladle and strain this right into a mason jar. I have these quart size wide mouth mason jars that are perfect for it. However, I prefer doing this because if there's any impurities left, or if I want to repeat the process, which I'll talk about in a moment, then it's easier to get the tallow out of this bowl than out of a mason jar, because it actually hardens up quite a bit, especially when you put it in the refrigerator. Completely filled up with these little bits and pieces. We'll let that strain. And also lift it up here. We can also let this sit here for a bit and let that drain. I will show you what that looks like once this is cooled off, and we'll take out the bits and pieces. You can either just toss them out. If you have a dog, they may love these. They're also not bad for eating, but they're not quite as palatable, I want to say, as the large cracklings, but you can totally eat those. So this is about 24 hours later, and we have the solid tallow here in this bowl. Before I'm going to show you what I will do with it next, I just wanted to mention that yes, this whole rendering process you can do on the stove, which is the super simple method that I showed you. If you have a crock pot, that works really well. You can also do it in your oven, in obviously an oven-proof vessel like a enameled cast iron pot or even a stainless steel pot. And you simply set the oven to about 250 degrees, and you stir it every 30 to 45 minutes until it looks the same that I showed you yesterday, where you have a lot of fat, liquid fat, and the little bits and pieces and grisly parts separated and floating on top. So those are 3 different methods how you can render your tallow. Now, this is really solid at room temperature. It's not going anywhere. But what I want to do is I want to get it out of this bowl so I can see if there's any impurities at the bottom and take them off, because they will make this tallow go bad faster. And the best way to do this is to simply turn on the stove and then just gently heat it up, melt it, and very carefully melt it, kind of turning it, being careful not to burn yourself. But you'll see it when the edges get a little darker in color and you get some tallow, liquid tallow running around. It's also probably going to move. Here we go. That's enough. It's moving in here. So now I'll simply get it out and look at the bottom here. Wow, and it actually looks really clean. Sometimes you get other bits and pieces and just some impurities and almost like a brown residue sitting here. And then all you need to do is take a knife and scrape it off. So obviously this is a little bit difficult to store, and I will remelt it so I can put it either into, now I've got tallow on my hands here. I can either put it in mason jars. However, it is really, really solid, even at room temperature. Not to even talk about when you store it in the refrigerator where it gets even more solid. So I am gonna remelt it and then pour it into a square dish. And we place that in here over low medium heat. I need to get the tallow off my hands, but you know, it's really good for your hands. It's really good for your skin. It's super moisturizing, which you will feel for yourself once you make this, because your hands will feel so soft. So, however, I do want all of this melting in here. over low heat. Where you put it once it is melted and poured is really mostly dependent on how you intend to use it. If you're just going to use it for cooking and you're fine scooping it out with a spoon, or if you want to do something else with it. So I'll show you my next step. And while this is melting over here, I think I need to turn it down just a little bit. I have prepared a glass square baking dish, which is perfect for the amount that I have here. I put some parchment paper in it. You can also use wax paper. And then I will pour it in here, so when it solidifies, I can cut it in little bars, which are a little bit easier to handle and to store. So now it's liquid again. As you can see, it has that nice golden color. And when it's solid, it's a nice pure white. If for any reason there is some bits and pieces in there or some impurities, what you can do is at this point run it through your cheesecloth or your fine mesh strainer to get everything out. So now we'll just simply pour this into my glass baking dish. Just to show you, I will also pour some into this mason jar. So I'm going to fill that up. And the rest goes in here. Now we'll let this solidify. You can put it in your refrigerator to speed up the process. And here is your jar of practically odorless white tallow, rendered so easily. And if you're looking for more easy recipes for your homesteading and homemaking kitchen, I have an entire playlist here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.